Ghosts, goblins, haunted houses, Halloween candy. What's scarier? So each of these things can be scary, that's for sure. But today we're going to talk about Halloween candy and what's scary about having a poor relationship with food and sugar. Hello and welcome to Nutrition Unfiltered, a podcast where science meets sass. I am Christy Maloney, registered dietitian and eating disorder specialist. This is a place where we talk nutrition, ask the hard questions, and have some fun along the way. I'm so glad you're here. I love Halloween. It's my absolute most favorite day of the whole year. So I remember being a kid and going trick-or-treating and the excitement of putting on the costume and going out, getting the candy, sorting the candy, just being so excited about it. As a college student, it was a little bit more interesting. We still put on the costume and went out, but it was a time that we had for sure. Then, as an adult and now a mom, the things that I really look forward to in Halloween are dressing my daughter up. My family and I were tending to do family costumes where we all are kind of in a theme. Spoiler alert, this year we're doing Beetlejuice. So, doing that, taking our daughter out, walking the neighborhood with our friends, getting candy, hanging out with just other people that we really enjoy. It truly, truly, truly is my favorite day of the whole year. It's a time when you can be a kid again and just enjoy, sort of like make believe and having a good time and everybody being out together. I will say, if you struggle with your relationship with food, Halloween can be a very unintentionally scary time in ways that you weren't thinking about. So things that can be hard that I see in my clients are a fear of binging on Halloween candy, a fear of their kids binging on Halloween candy, a fear of their kids not knowing how to moderate themselves with Halloween candy. All of those things, come up in my sessions. And those are things that I want to talk with you about today in terms of how to navigate those situations. So there's going to be two parts to this podcast. The first part is going to be directed to adults that struggle with relationship with food and anxiety around candy and binging, that sort of thing. The second is going to be related to parents and how to handle conversations with their kids around candy in ways that are going to not negatively impact their relationship with food. So when we as adults start to think about Halloween candy, what do you think about? Is it immediately that your favorite candy is Reese's Cups like mine? Is it that you prefer sour versus sweet candy? Or is it that you're just afraid of it? Does it evoke a feeling of, if I let myself have candy even if I just let myself have candy around me, that this is going to lead to an out of control and a spiral? And if you feel that way, it's completely normal. I know a lot of people, a lot of clients that struggle with this. So I just want you to know that that feeling's normal, but it can be helped, right? Like you can overcome that and be able to enjoy things like Halloween without the sort of intrinsic anxiety that comes with it. If you're thinking about candy as a binge trigger, I want to invite you to think about, for any other binge trigger, right? Be it Halloween candy or whatever other food that you're worried about binging on, we're still going to come back to the basics of having a good relationship with food. Now, as we're thinking about this, specifically coming back to the example of Halloween candy, the things that I want you to remind yourself is that food is neither good nor bad, right? Like candy isn't bad where an apple is good. Food is food, period, the end. It's not inherently moral. So if your immediate first thought was candy is bad, I can't have it or I shouldn't have it, pause right there and challenge that thought, because that is absolutely not true. When you're thinking about, candy as being the thing that you can't have, psychologically, that drives binging, right? Because then it becomes the forbidden fruit, so to speak. So if we can take that polarization of good or bad away, that's really important, even though I know that's really hard and it's something that you'll probably need to practice. The other part of that is I want you to think about, a little visualization of how you want Halloween night to go down, right? So if you're going out with friends, if you're going to a Halloween party, if you're going out with your children getting candy, how do you want that to play out, right? So if you're thinking about what you want to eat that night, right? I don't want you going into the situation having not eaten anything, right? So as much as we think about not allowing yourself to have the food as a binge trigger, not eating in advance is 100% a binge trigger, right? So if we come back to kind of the knowledge of there's two reasons why people binge, right? One is psychological. There's a mental restriction going on over I can't have the food, it's not allowable. The other is physical restriction. So that's not eating enough, becoming overly hungry. Both of those things can lead to binges in and of themselves, but when you have both of them going on at the same time, that's really hard to overcome. So, no matter what you're doing on the day of, I want you to make sure that you're eating meals and snacks going into whatever the event's going to be so you don't have that physical binge trigger. Then when you get to the event, you get to whatever it is you're gonna be doing, I want you to remind yourself that no food is good or bad. Candy, so let's take Reese's Cups, for example. So those have a little bit of protein, a little bit of carb, and then fat in it. Your body knows what to do with those ingredients. Those are not foreign to your body. Should we have Reese's Cups all the time as our exclusive nutrition? No, that's not balanced. But if you get to the space of allowing it to be okay and those foods are neutral, you'll be able to have a couple Reese's Cups, move on with it, not feel guilty, and not let that be a binge trigger because all of a sudden you have blown it. That's something that we commonly really hear. Okay, so if we come back to our visualization, right, of how you want events to go down when they're kind of food centric. What do you want for yourself? Do you want to go into the event and be laid back, casual, not worried, unbothered about food? If so, then these are the things that you want to practice. Are you going to get it right 100% of the time? I mean, that would be cool, but probably not, right? So if you get to Halloween, for instance, and you binge on candy, like that's okay. You don't have to start over on November 1st. You don't have to beat yourself up about it. You just know, like, hey, that happened. Is there anything I would have done differently? Should I've had a snack like a little bit later so I wasn't just ravenously hungry? Or did I still have some mental restriction going on that I just kind of wasn't owning up to? Those are the things you want to look back and say, like, hey, what would I have done differently? And move on from it. And that's fine. So, the framework I use a lot with my clients is called intuitive eating. So, that is a set of 10 kind of principles that help guide people into listening to their body and knowing what they want. Part of what they talk about that I strongly agree with is called habituation. That just means that you get used to having things around. Some questions I get is should I just avoid it altogether? Should I abstain? Should I just not have it around? And my answer to that is no, for two reasons. Because one, if it's not around, you can't habituate to it. You can't get used to it. And that's ultimately the end goal of what we're going for. The other part of that is that it gives the food so much power, right? If you're building it up in your brain and you're kind of saying like, this is something, a substance that I cannot have in my presence, that gives the food so much power and ignites so much fear that when you get around it, it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of when I'm around this food, I'm going to lose control. At first, right, when you're trying to habituate to a food, you have the Halloween candy around, you might binge, you might feel out of control. But the key with that is to keep coming back, right? Like repeated exposures to get used to, okay, well, if there's Reese's Cups over there, and historically those have been a binge trigger to me, today they might be, but today they might not be, right? And so once you have that more neutral relationship with the proverbial Reese's Cups, the less power those things are going to hold over you. And that's something that's really scary to work on, but it's also super important and incredibly valuable in overcoming a negative relationship with food. Now we're going to transition to part 2 of the episode and how do parents help their children navigate Halloween candy and their relationship with that particular food. I generally find it unhelpful if parents refer to any food as bad or you shouldn't eat that or generally paints any kind of food in a negative light, right? Because even as adults, when we have things that we believe are bad, if you tell a kid that's really bad, you shouldn't eat that, that automatically sends a sign that that's bad, that's a bad behavior, you shouldn't do that, right? And with any other behavior for a kid, if you tell them that's bad, don't do it, they assume that they're bad if they do it, and that is the same, right? Like with food. So when we're thinking about creating a positive relationship with food, nobody's bad if they eat candy, right? Nobody is a bad person because they do that. And so when we watch our language around kids, that becomes really integral in setting them up for a positive relationship with food. On my don't do list is moralize food or talk about food in the good or bad context. But Halloween is such a great time to help your kids explore a positive relationship with food, right? It's a food-centric holiday where, it's centered around sugar, which is something that our society definitely demonizes. And so if you're thinking about what do you ultimately want for your kid, right, in terms of their long-term relationship with food, likely that's going to be you would want them to have a healthy anxiety less, experience with what it is they're choosing to eat. And this is a great time to practice that. So, on actual Halloween, what do you want to do? You want to go trick or treating with your kids and have fun. It's really a buzzkill if after each house you say, you're not going to eat all of that, or you shouldn't have that, or oh my gosh, that's so much chocolate. That's so bad. That's a buzzkill. Like, let's not do that. It's supposed to be a fun night. When kids get home, they're going to want to sort their candy. They're going to want to see how much of each thing that they've gotten. And that's fine. That's like a rite of passage as a kid. And if they're with their friends or they're with their siblings and they want to trade candy, again, totally fine. They're kind of actively saying, like, I don't really love sweet tarts, but I love Reese's Pieces, whatever the thing, which is actually a really good way to let them naturally get in touch with things that they do and don't like, asking themselves how they feel about things. The other piece of that is not only are they learning what things that they enjoy and that food can be fun, this is also a really great time for them to learn about their hunger and fullness cues and regulating those things, right? So if a kid, they had dinner, whatever, you went out, you're trick or treating, they come home, they have some candy. That's a really great time for them to kind of check in with themselves, or even, with some gentle questions from you, like, oh, are you still hungry? I know we had dinner, we did some walking around. Are you pretty hungry right now? And teaching them how to check in with themselves versus and have this internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. Now, I'm going to say something that might feel a little bit uncomfortable. Your kid might binge on Halloween candy. Your kid might eat too much Halloween candy. The goal is not to, again, be a buzzkill here. You might point out, like, hey, are you feeling really full? Like, kind of where are you at? What's your body telling you? Which again directs them to listen to themselves versus an external locus of control. But if they overeat candy, it's not the worst thing that could happen, because what are they going to learn from that? They're going to learn that if I eat past the point of fullness, I'm going to make myself not feel well, right? And for most of us, that's a lesson that can actually be fairly beneficial, because then you learn, what is my body telling me, what feels good, what doesn't. The way you get your kids to do the opposite of what you want them to do is tell them what to do, right? So if you're kind of over their shoulder harping on them, don't eat candy, don't eat too much, don't eat this, don't eat that, what does that do? That creates a sense of rebellion of, well, my mom told me not to, but I want to, so I'm going to do it anyway, right? And we know as parents in every other situation, kids are going to do the opposite of what you want. And that's no different here. So if we're thinking about this in terms of just psychology, and you're helping coach them on listening to their body and make their own autonomous choices with candy and what they eat, this is a really great time to practice that. And again, if they eat more candy than makes them feel good, it's okay. It's all right. They're going to learn from that experience. Next, I want to talk about what is the actual scariest character on Halloween. That would be the Switch Witch. Now, if you haven't heard of the Switch Witch, I'll fill you in. The Switch Witch is something that parents sometimes do where they tell their kids, like, okay, you've gotten all your candy, you're home, you can eat as much candy as you want tonight, But then when you wake up tomorrow on November 1st, the switch witch came and took the candy and they've left you a present or money or like whatever other thing they're switching the candy for. I am not an advocate of this for for all of the reasons that we've been talking about, right? In terms of letting your child regulate their hunger and fullness and learning autonomously what their body is telling them. What does this do? It recreates a binge restrict cycle, right? So we know as adults, when I was talking to adults earlier in the episode, if we have a mental restricting, that can create a physical binge, right? So that's what's happening here, but a little bit in reverse. If you tell kids you can have as much Halloween candy as you want tonight, but it's all going to be gone in the morning, what are they going to do? They're going to eat as much as they can and they're going to not feel great. I know I just said that if a kid binges on Halloween candy, it's not the worst thing in the world, and that's still true. But what did they learn, right? If the switch which is coming is that it's going to be gone, there's scarcity. I better eat it all now because then it's going to go away. Versus ultimately what we want kids to learn is you can have some now and the candy will still be there tomorrow. And if you want it then, that's fine. That really helps kids learn to regulate hunger and fullness, what they want, how their body's feeling. But when we as parents kind of put that in, that we're going to take it away, it's going to be gone, it creates this immediate, almost primal urge to binge out of scarcity mentality. So, what do we do on November 1st with all the candy if the Switch Witch is not coming? This is a time that you, again, kind of model how to have a really great relationship with food and have food around and not let it be a binge trigger. So let's say you still have your bucket or bag full of candy, whatever it is. That can be one of those things that they can have a couple pieces of candy each day in their lunch or after dinner. They can pick out what they really enjoy the most. And I think it's fair, especially if you're having dinner and they want some candy after to explore them. Oh, are you still hungry? Like, how hungry are you? What candy might feel good to you? Are you in the mood for sweet or sour? All of those are really great prompts to help your kid check in with themselves. You can do things like keep some of it out and freeze some of it. It just depends on how much you've got and how long you want it to go on. Typically in our house, it sits in a bucket and everybody has some here and there until it's gone or it's old and we throw it away. One of those things are going to happen. But ultimately, after Halloween is over, if you kind of say, all right, well, that's it, you can't have any more, or it's extremely limited or restricted, that does create more of that restrictive scarcity sort of thing that will then cause kids to see that as something that's forbidden. And we all know that's the thing they're going to want to go after. So, one other thing that is very common, a very common struggle for parents is thinking, oh my gosh, sugar is so unhealthy. It's so toxic. I can't let my kid have this. There's all these anxieties that come up with it. The thing that is actually the most unhealthy is if your kids have a negative relationship with sugar than if they actually have some sugar. So, as a parent, if you're feeling that anxiety coming up over, oh my gosh, my kids had 10 pieces of candy. This feels like too much. What am I going to do? Just remind yourself that this is Halloween. It's fine, right? Like they're going to be okay tomorrow. And that sugar is just going to be a natural part of people's lives. If it's something that definitely, if we restrict, it makes the relationship with it worse. So, if you can remind yourself that your kid is actually learning valuable skills for how to like interact with candy, that can go a long way. It can help kind of ease your mind. When you're, in the thick of that sort of stress. One other question I get from parents a lot, and it can be, around any kind of food, but it's, do I let my kids eat whatever, whenever they want, or do I have some level of control over that? I generally refer people to Ellen Satter's division of responsibility, which means that the parents are in charge of when and what, and kids are responsible for if and how much. So if you're coming at it from a place of, I'm going to let my kid have some sugar, which is a really healthy thing to do, you kind of say, if the kid's asking for candy, 30 minutes before dinner, it's completely fair to say, like, hey, we're going to have dinner shortly. And then after that, you can pick 2 or 3 pieces of whatever you want. But we just want to make sure that we go ahead and get dinner in first because those nutrients are really important too. So that helps them understand I need a balance of all foods. I need to eat my protein and my fruits and my veggies and all of those things in addition to the candy. And that really helps set them up for an all foods fit mentality. Thank you so much for joining me for this super spooky Halloween episode on sugar and candy. If you're struggling with relationship with food yourself or you're looking for more resources, feel free to check out my nutrition recovery workbook, which will be linked in the show notes, for ways to help further inspect your own relationship with food and see how it might be less scary for you too. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Happy Halloween! Thank you for joining me today on Nutrition Unfiltered. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share with others that might enjoy it as well. You can follow me on Instagram at eatingdisorder.dietitian. Thanks for getting sassy with me.